had I not had that experience to like get away and kind of like take care of myself and have my aunt there who was just like, you want to, try out fashion design, go do that. You want to sing, go do that. Like, it was just like, try all the things. Like, I am not going to judge you for it. Like, just go be you and explore who you are.
Many people want to navigate life with peace and joy, but struggle to connect to their intuition. They find themselves overwhelmed, burned out, and frustrated. My name is Francesca Phillips, and I'm obsessed with spirituality and psychology and how the two can intersect to help you live a successful and intuitive life. I believe each of us can accomplish amazing things through balance and healthy habits instead of burnout. Consider this your go-to resource for where spiritual wellness and mindful productivity meets practical wisdom. If you're craving positivity and want to know how to find the answers within, instead of searching endlessly without, then you're in the right place. Get ready to feel supported and inspired. This is the Good Space Podcast. You're listening to the Good Space Podcast, episode number 38. This one thing may be holding you back from finding your purpose. Before we dive in, I want to give my warm appreciation to our reviewer of the week, Carissa Tatum, and they say, I'm so glad this podcast came along. Francesca selects guests that have amazing insights to contribute. She asks thoughtful questions and really gets into the tactical aspects of personal development. Within moments, this podcast uplifts my mood. Plus, I always get valuable takeaways that I've used to enhance my quality of life. Carissa Tatum, thank you for sharing the transformation you've had listening to the show. I'm so happy the Good Space has helped you improve your quality of life, and I'm grateful for your dedication to learn and grow. If you want to be highlighted in an upcoming episode and help further the mission of the Good Space, make sure to subscribe and give us a review on Apple Podcasts so I can then highlight your review in an upcoming episode. It only takes a minute. You can pause the episode and come right back. Make sure to screenshot this episode on your phone and tag us on your Instagram story at @FindYourGoodSpace, #TheGoodSpace, to let me know that you're joining in today, as you know that I love to share those screenshots on our stories too. Listen, I'm not afraid to be honest here. A lot of people struggle with feeling overwhelmed and burned out. The number one question I'm asked is, how do I know what to focus on? Or how can I simplify my life more and feel more peace? Look no further, my friend. In February, the Good Space is hosting an event with Dr. Amanda Tobe to help you create your own personal compass, which will make clear when to say no, what feels right to say yes to, and how to be truly intentional. This is such a gift. Knowing what's worth saying no to and just simplifying the heck out of your life, knowing what's in alignment and going hard on the things that truly feel aligned to your soul. This will be a more personalized, community-based process that expands on what you'll learn in today's podcast episode. So if you find your head nodding yes and you're like, yes, I want to simplify, I want to clarify and move forward with intention and action and just faith, then click on the link in our show notes now to get the deets. All right, here we go. Okay, we are going to welcome an amazing woman to the podcast today. Her name is Lisa Nicole Rosado, and she's the founder and creative director, chief motivator, and big idea generator of We Are Women Owned. After a decade as a retail buyer in New York City, Lisa founded lifestyle blog The Style Theory, an online boutique TST collective where she partnered with brands like Birchbox, Saks Fifth Avenue, and Spanx. When she couldn't find a welcoming, supportive community for emerging business owners like her, Lisa created We Are Women Owned, also known as WAWO, WAWO. And in addition to being the go-to platform for discovering, shopping, and supporting women-owned brands, We Are Women Owned also hosts a community and a series of in-person and virtual pop-up shops and events for female identifying small business owners. She's been featured in Mind Body Green, Sway, and Martha Stewart. Lisa is an NYC-born Latina, winged liner lover, and personal assessment enthusiast. Welcome, Lisa, to the podcast.
Yay! Thank you for having me, Francesca, and thank you for the lovely intro.
Yes, I'm so glad you're here. And I want to talk briefly about how we actually met. It was just the most random, but like synchronistic moment. Did you want to share how we met?
Honestly, it's still sort of a mystery to me, but I saw that you were hosting a room. Is that what you say? I don't even know the proper terminology quite yet.
That's how you say it.
On Clubhouse. And it had to do with productivity, I believe. And that's something that I'm always thinking about, especially now that I have officially been diagnosed with ADHD. So it just like, I was like, I'm going to pop in. And honestly, I was working. So I was planning to just like have it on and just tune in and absorb any of the insights that you might have to share. And then you called on me and we just ended up having like a 40-minute incredible conversation about productivity and just life as an entrepreneur. So that's wild. And then I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation. I mean, even in the moment of our conversation, I was like, you know what? I feel like so many women, because we do have a membership community for small women-owned businesses, or business owners, I should say. And so I just knew, I was like, so many women would benefit from this conversation. I would love for Francesca to come speak. And it turns out Erin, who's my co-pilot, that's kind of her official title, because she does so much that it's hard to kind of, we can't pigeonhole her. Like, she's my co-pilot and the co-pilot for We Are Women Owned. I was telling her about you, went to go share your Instagram account with her. And it turns out she follows you on both her personal and her business account. And I was like, wait a minute, you know Francesca? And she's like, what? How did it not occur to me that you two would hit it off? Like, why didn't I make this connection? So it's just funny how the universe just works sometimes.
No, seriously. And I really feel like that's what it was. Like, the universe was like, you guys are meant to meet, because I have known Erin for a while. And the funny thing is that I always see her posting about We Are Women Owned, but in our conversation, for some reason, it didn't click in that moment. But I was like, I feel like I know this brand. Like, I've heard it before, but maybe it's just me being like silly, whatever. And so, it was just wild that we actually have a really close connection. And I love what you're doing. Like, I think what you're doing is incredible. It's amazing. It's so needed, especially during this time. And actually, for people who are listening, if you don't know what Clubhouse is, because right now it's only for iPhone users, but it's essentially an app where it's audio only. So people can have different conversations. They're called rooms, because the idea is in Clubhouse, if you're walking down a hallway, different rooms have different classes or conversations. You would pop in and hear it and be like, oh, I want to listen to this, or I want to listen to that conversation. And so I had been testing it and I started a conversation on there. And then that's how Lisa came to stumble upon what I was talking about. So before we dive into everything, I actually was curious about the fact that you said you were diagnosed with ADHD. So how does that impact you as a business owner? And how have you been able to work with it or around it, or however that looks like?
Yeah, I'm still figuring it out. I think I'll always be figuring it out. And that has been a primary focus. I'm an open book, so I'll share this. I started going to therapy in 2019. I'm like, what is time? What are the years? And then I stopped because it's just so expensive in New York City, even with like sliding scale rates. And I felt pretty okay, even though I think for me, at least, it's important that it's ongoing. And then last year happened, got my official diagnosis. And because of the pandemic and everything just changing so quickly and the uncertainty of everything and trying to keep the business alive. And again, with We Are Women Owned, we do support a lot of small businesses, and they were really suffering and freaked out. I kind of pushed my personal life aside and really tried to figure out, okay, like, how do we, I know people say pivot. For us, it was more of an evolution, I feel, because we had already been kind of setting things in place to transition to doing more digitally. So we were already there. So it was just like an evolution for us. And I was just rolling with the punches, and I didn't think too much about, caring for myself or getting the proper care that I needed. So I didn't put too much thought into what ADHD meant for me as a woman, as a wife, as an entrepreneur, as a daughter, as a sister. Those are like the big encompassing things in my life. And that's really what I've been focused on this year. There's so much that I love about my ADHD brain. And it's also really fascinating to hear that a large number of people who have ADHD are entrepreneurs. I think that's so cool. Yeah, a lot of people aren't diagnosed, especially women. That's kind of like something that's more recent. And even so, with the knowledge that we do have with women being diagnosed, there's still so much that is unknown. So it's a very interesting time to receive that diagnosis. But what was happening for me, and I definitely want to film like an Instagram video or something, I don't know, talking about my journey with ADHD, because it's been a long journey. I've actually suspected since high school when I first learned what it was, really, and kind of just pushed it off. And when I would try to talk to people about it, they would always say, "You're just being so hard on yourself," which, yeah, but there's so much more going on. I've discovered that for a lot of my life, I was really great at masking.
What were the things that you were experiencing that made you question?
So it's interesting. And I've more so opened up about it with my mom recently, because I think because I internalized it and masked it so well, it's hard for people to understand. Because she's like, but wait a minute, like in New York, which is where I grew up, we had classes that were called IGC, which meant intelligent and gifted. I don't know if that still exists. It's kind of weird to me. She's like, how, like, but you were in those classes and you were doing so well. And like, I don't understand. And there is such thing as like thriving with ADHD. But when I was in middle school, I started to struggle when it came to schoolwork and staying on top of everything. I just didn't express that to people. To maintain, my IGC status, it was just like all I could think about all the time of like, is it hard for everyone, or is it just me? And so I would kind of have a hard time focusing on things. I would really thrive in classes that I was interested in and would just do okay, like barely passing. Okay, this started like my later years of middle school in the classes that didn't really hold my interest so much. I struggled with memorization. I, would have brain fog and all of these things. And then there's always this internal dialogue happening for me. But again, I didn't know that it wasn't a neurotypical thing, if that makes sense, because I thought like everybody might be this way. And then that showed more and more as I went into college. Yeah, it was just really interesting. I actually went to college. I went to Pace University in Manhattan, and the intention was to major in international business management. I probably could have done it and stuck with it, but it just wasn't registering for me. Like it was hard. It wasn't holding my attention. Performing arts was something that I'd always been interested in, as introverted as I was. And, so I wasn't doing great. Like I was scraping by my first couple of years of college. And then when I made the decision, because they have a really great acting program, to see if I could get in, and I did, it was one of the hardest things I've done to put myself out there. Let me say that. And that way, as someone who I'm still pretty introverted, but was incredibly, like unhealthily introverted to put myself out in that way. But my grades soared. And I mean that like in most of my other classes as well. I was like on the dean's list, didn't even know it because I'd moved around so many times. And my mail was just getting lost. But it just goes to show, like, if I'm able to like give 100+% and I'm able to like hold my focus when it's something that I'm interested in. If I'm not, forget about it. It's like, it feels impossible. And I did struggle with memorization when it came to having to memorize a script. And I remember it would bother me so much that I think it was like Shakespeare 102 or something like that. I remember going to class early one day and talking to my professor and saying like, I don't know what it is. I'm struggling to memorize this. ADHD didn't come up in conversation. And I don't remember what that conversation was like, but I just really tried harder and harder. It's just very interesting to see, like, if there's something that I'm interested in, I can soar in that area. But if it doesn't hold any interest, like whatsoever, it's daunting. Like I don't thrive. And then it was interesting because I would say the signs really showed up when I became an entrepreneur, and I didn't have as much structure in my life. And I was the one creating my schedule and deciding what gets done day to day. Because I was a manager and a buyer for a few boutiques in New York City. And I did have some sort of structure, even though it was very much like I was handling more sides than just buying and managing. And that's kind of like the beauty of working with a small business, is that you can really get your hands in there and learn the ins and outs of running a business. And that I really love. Like I could never have a 9-to-5 office job. Like I could never do it. And I'm so glad I realized that early on, because that would have been just not good, not good, not healthy, not productive for me. Even though there was I did a lot of things, there was still some structure and I had someone that I had to show up for. With entrepreneurship, there was less of that. And I started to realize, oh my God, it is hard for me to kind of figure out, I'm a big idea person, breaking down the tiny, tiny steps and doing those tiny, tiny steps in order to achieve that big goal has not been my strong suit. I would say entrepreneurship. And then when you have to show up for people, and that was giving me anxiety of I don't feel like I'm my best self, and all of these things came into play. And I was going through a lot. I was having autoimmune issues, a lot of issues with motivation and focus and fatigue and all of that, and went to the doctor. And I remember going in, and it's so funny because I'm telling you, I suspected this since middle school. The doctor goes, "It sounds to me like you have ADHD." And I just looked at her. I'm sure she had 7 heads. I don't understand why. And maybe this is why. Maybe I received that as if she was saying all of the inflammation on my joints and all of these things was in my head. I think that's how I received it. So it was strange. And she gave me a referral to a psychiatrist, and I did nothing with it until later that year when I was talking to a friend who she actually helped with the design and the aesthetic of our in-person pop-ups, when we were just catching up before we were diving into work. And she told me, she's like, "I'm pretty sure I have ADHD." And then all of a sudden I thought back to the start of the year, and I was like, wait a minute, why did I push that away when it's something that I suspected that I had? And then a few months after that, went to go see a psychiatrist, and I officially got diagnosed. So yeah.
Wow. That's incredible. Does it feel better to have a name to it and an understanding to it?
100%. And there's almost a grieving process that comes with it. I don't know how to explain it. There are days where I'm yeah, my brain is awesome. And then there are days where I am so hard on myself and I'm frustrated because I feel I'm punching a brick wall, and I'm not getting anywhere. And it's just, sometimes my brain feels amazing, and sometimes I do need that extra care and that extra rest. And I do have to take a big of a back seat. And so we actually talked about this a little bit personally. I've become much more aware of my energy levels and really having to listen to that as someone, as an entrepreneur, right? As a woman, but also as someone who has ADHD and also, some autoimmune issues. It's been interesting for sure. And then there's also I don't know if other people can relate to this. I'm sure, whether it's autoimmune or, something when it comes to your mental health, mourning your past self, because I used to be able to do so much. And there was a period of time where I was running every single little thing when it came to my business. And I'm just not cut out for that anymore. There are times where it can get really, really frustrating, especially when you're working around, or working alongside people who are such go-getters and they have so much energy and they're just on top of things and productive. I have had moments of, I'm why can't I do that anymore? And at the same time, feeling grateful that We Are Women Owned is growing, and we're at a place where we are able to hire that support. Could use a lot more of it, but it definitely helps to have people who are supporting me in the areas that aren't my strongest suit or that take me forever to do and don't energize me. I still have some of that, but just recognizing those areas for me, where I shine and, the things that just feel awful to do and take way too long to accomplish, and finding people to support me in those areas.
Yes. Oh man. And what's funny? Obviously I probably would feel the same way, mourning my old self or whatnot, but let me know if this sounds true to you now, that maybe it's a little bit of a blessing in disguise, because you even said yourself, you're a visionary. You like to think big picture. So it's like, that's really what you should be focusing on. And if you look at Richard Branson, if you look at any entrepreneur like Sarah Blakely, all those people, I bet you they're not doing all the things. They're not doing things they don't like. They're not doing anything less than the bigger picture. So in a way, it's almost like the universe is like, okay, Lisa, like we need you to focus on what you're good at and what you're passionate about and just let everyone else support the other things. So in a way, that's kind of cool that you figured that out early on, because a lot of people wait way too long to make that change in their life and in their business. And something that I have noticed is, you know, in the beginning, you talked about how it was like a mask, like you kind of hid it or you didn't want to admit it. And I know that We Are Women Own is very transparent and passionate about supporting businesses from all walks of life, especially minority women business owners. But I was reading an article for Sway that I think that you wrote, and how initially you hid different parts of who you were and you played small. So to go from that to what you're doing now, what was the turning point for you that led you to envision a brighter future for yourself?
Oh my God. I don't know. I'm like blown away. I feel like I'm tooting my horn, so that feels like weird, but I'm like blown away at the growth that has happened so I was talking about my high school experience in particular there, but it starts even way before that with having a special needs sibling and having a really hard time letting people into my life because of that growing up. I was very protective. And then when I was 13 years old, I moved to Connecticut I moved away to live with my aunt and my uncle, and I went to high school there. And whoa, it was a culture shock because yes, there were a lot of like Latin people and Black people and all of that, but it was so culturally diverse where I grew up. To then go to Connecticut in the specific area that I lived and being like going from the majority to the minority was just, again, such a culture shock for me. It was wild. And I didn't realize what that would do to me. And I did keep myself very small because I was treated differently, not only because of my ethnicity, but also because I came from the Bronx and like the stereotypes that came with that. And so I did. There was so much that I wanted to express at that time, and I didn't. But I did get involved with this program called Names, and it was all about being kinder, more empathetic humans. And it was like this big conference where I think it still happens till this day, which is really awesome. But allowing people, like creating space, like a safe space for people to share their experience, whether that's being marginalized in some way and bullying and all of that. And I feel like that was a turning point for me, like being involved in something like that. But also, I have to say that I'm so grateful and I feel so blessed to have had that opportunity to move away, because there was so much going on in my home life that I kind of needed it to become who I am today. But my aunt, oh my gosh, that I love so much. She's another mother to me. I had never really experienced what safe space was until I had the opportunity to live with her. And I've been reflecting on this a lot as we've gotten more press for We Are Women Owned, which is great. And thinking about like, how did I get here? And like, why is safety and creating safe space important to me? And I really feel like that opportunity and getting away and having someone who loved me for me, not to say that my parents don't, but it was just so accepting and wanted me to explore all the parts of myself and was very nurturing. That definitely is infused in all that I do moving forward. I did feel misunderstood for most of my life. I still do.
Girl, I feel the same way. It's so crazy because I'm like, man, I feel like you're like a soul sister to me, because I have felt the same way. And it's because when I moved to LA, for me, it was having a circle of friends that let me be who I was. And they gave me this safe space to go for things bigger than I would have before and to feel safe enough to grow spiritually. And that's part of why that is the reason I created the Good Space, is because I would see so many people didn't have that luxury of having that supportive friendship or community or family that would let them be vulnerable enough to test out spiritually who they want to become. And so, yes,
I have chills. No, it's so true. But it's just a recent thing of like, had I not had that experience to like get away and kind of like take care of myself and have my aunt there who was just like, you want to, try out fashion design, go do that. You want to sing, go do that. Like, it was just like, try all the things. Like, I am not going to judge you for it. Like, just go be you and explore who you are. And then when I decided to become an entrepreneur, first of all, I was blogging for a number of years. And I just feel like for so long, I was searching for my people. And I thought that blogging was the thing because I was like, oh, these people have similar interests. And I was working crazy, crazy hours. When I tell you, like, I was involved with so many aspects of running a small business for other people, I really was. And so I was like, I'm not making friends really. My customers were like my buddies. And so I started the blog because I was like, oh, I love fashion and beauty and talking about lifestyle and all these things. And maybe that's a way to like make some connections. And I have to tell you, it was like a rude awakening for me because I am not a confrontational person. I don't like the drama, none of that. And at the time, I felt a lot of that. I'm not saying everybody's that way. There are a handful of people from that community that are still really good friends of mine, and we support each other in various ways and, catch up when we can. And I appreciate them. But I was like, this isn't it. Like this is not quite what I had in mind. And so when diving into entrepreneurship and feeling alone and isolated, and I was very depressed because I was like home all day working. I didn't know all the things. I still don't know all the things. And I just didn't really have anyone to lean on for support, whether that's emotional or who understood, obviously, the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur, especially like a small business owner starting out, but also like, how do you get this up and running? And like, what's the best way to ship items? Like, I just didn't have anyone to talk to. Granted, there are more communities like that now, which is amazing. But at the time, this was in 2016, there weren't many around. And so in 2017, I decided to start hosting in-person events in support of women-owned small businesses. And that really started out of a need for me to get my brand out there, paired with my desire for community. And it went from like a teeny tiny pop-up with 4 brands, including myself. And then 2 months later, it was 17. And then it just like kept going. I think at this point, we've done 15. Granted, we didn't do any last year, and I'm still not ready for it. Yeah, it just snowballed. And in turn, we fostered this amazing sisterhood. And one of the things that I would really ingrain in the women is like, sure, like I want you to get your brand out there and for you and your business to get visibility. But I also want to encourage you to think about the connections you can make and the relationships you can foster with one another, because that has been such a game changer in my life and my business. And it's just so cool just to see these women and how they've supported each other throughout the years and how they've worked with each other throughout the years and like collaborated and hired each other. And it's the coolest thing ever. And to think like all of the experiences that I've had throughout my life kind of brought us to this moment and to We Are Women Own is really, really cool. It makes so much sense. Even though like, if I talk about my life story, a lot of people would be like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I just kept trusting. I'm like, I don't know, but this feels like the next right step, even if it didn't seem linear. And so to see like everything in my life come together full circle and to create something that I'm so passionate about and that allows me the opportunity to connect and serve so many is like, it's the best. I don't know. What more could I ask for? I don't know.
It's amazing. No, that's incredible. And you can really tell, anytime I've spoken to you, how passionate you are and how aligned this is for you. And I just love seeing that because it gives people hope. Like, okay, I can try all the things and get to something that actually fulfills me. I want to take a quick pause for a second and ask if you've ever heard people talking about being the designers, authors, or leaders of their own life and wonder how they did it. I know I have. It sounds great, right? Getting to design and create and lead your own life, but a lot of times those can be filler words. What does that actually mean in practice? And what can I do to make that a reality? The biggest way that people become the designers, authors, and leaders of their own life is because they're intentional about how they want to feel and they have the tools to do it. They know the habits that will help them feel their best, And while they have to-do lists, like most of us do, they also know what is on their not to-do list, which is super important. So that is why Dr. Amanda Tobe and I want to help you become the designer of your own life too, and share with you an experiential way to create your own personal compass with a workshop that we're putting on February 20th. And if you're enjoying what we're talking about on today's podcast and want to create your own compass, but do it with the guidance of myself and Amanda and with a small group of awesome people, this is for you. Through getting clear on how you want to feel in your life, you will learn to simplify your life, which is what we all want, right? We want to simplify. So in this workshop, you'll learn to focus on what's important and do more of what makes you feel good and less of what doesn't fill your cup. If this sounds like something you want support with, then come and join our next workshop beginning February 20th. Link with more details is in our bio. I hope to see you there. If someone listening right now is struggling to be themselves in their business or in their life, what would you say to them?
You got to go for it. You just got to go for it. I mean, there are things I would definitely recommend maybe having your finances in line, because I did leap in. When I tell you I leapt into entrepreneurship, I really, really did. And listen, I was able to do it somehow, but it was not at all easy. And there were some really dark times. So definitely have some things in place, make sure, you have a little money on the side, you have a little bit of a plan. I think it's so important to be flexible, even with some sort of plan, because things are bound, especially when you're first starting out, to shift and change. And, you shift and change throughout the process too. And I feel like I've been trying to separate myself from my business a little bit more, but they're so intertwined. So I definitely allow space and room and time for things to shift, but you just have to dip your foot in, put one toe in and just one foot in front of the other, I wouldn't be where I am now had I not taken that chance. A big piece of advice is try to have something in place for sure, and just go into it. Make sure you're surrounded by the right people too, because again, I didn't have that in the beginning, and it has been such a lifesaver for me. And what's great about our community is, and I thought about this because I was like, do we only allow people who are entrepreneurs, into the group? But I decided to keep it open to people who are serious about entering the entrepreneur space, but they haven't quite started yet, because my God, how valuable that would have been to someone like me, years ago. So I think, finding those right communities or the right people to support you on your journey, and vice versa. I feel like it's a fine dance of give and take. So giving and receiving, that's a better way. I don't like the take. So giving and receiving. So finding those relationships where it feels, I think of the infinity sign, where it feels very balanced and you two are supporting each other. Even if that's just one person, trust me, it makes all the difference. So make sure that you're surrounded by, the right people who can support you on that journey.
I also love how brave you were to take those steps, because I think of many people, and this was me as well, struggle with perfectionism and overthinking, overanalyzing, overplanning. And it sounds like you had a good balance between the two. Granted, you said you just jumped in and you made it through somehow, but now you would recommend, okay, have a little bit of a foundation. But what does it feel like when you knew this is what I need to do? Because you've done so many different things. And at the time, those things probably felt like this is the right thing. So is it by testing out so many different passions that you were able to come to the one that's really stuck for you? Or how does that feel to know this is what I want to do, this is when I need to move on, etc.?
Well, it's obviously shifted since that initial leap, but I felt it for almost 3 years, honestly. So it didn't just happen. When I mean leap, it was just there wasn't a big plan in place. It's I felt it and more so financially, there wasn't money set aside for it, it would have made my life easier. Sure. So it had been on my mind. And I just realized, because I was doing so much for other businesses. And when you work for a small business, especially in the retail space, you're very likely not being compensated enough. And I hold nothing against, my bosses at the time, like, especially now that I understand what it takes financially to run a business. But especially like there was one place that I was at for 5 years and I just felt like there was no room for growth for me. And I didn't have health insurance or any of the, you know what I mean? It was just like, I was doing okay, but even like my hourly raises weren't that much. And I was like, this isn't sustainable. And I feel like I'm pouring my heart and soul into this. Why don't I do this for myself? Like that's where it really started for me. And now to see what that's turned into and there were things that didn't feel aligned when I had my online shop. Like there was like such a detachment and I couldn't place it. Like I just couldn't place it, but that was the step I needed to take to get me here. And as those things started to align for me and click, I was like, oh, okay. Because when I initially started, had I not had, the experience of retail and starting my own thing, I likely would not have started the in-person events, right? And supporting women who were also starting out on their entrepreneurial journey as retailers, because that's what people were coming to me for. Like I was maybe a few steps ahead of them, I did have the experience of working for other businesses in that space. So I guess it might've been a few more steps in that, but in doing my own thing, that's what a lot of people were coming to me for. Now, like we have all sorts of women and businesses that are a part of our community. I felt it in my heart, like for almost 3 years that I was like, I think I'm meant to do my own thing. And this is the thing that I've been doing for a long, long time. And why am I not doing this for myself, even though it wasn't the thing, but it took me doing it to find out that this wasn't it. So I want to encourage people to leave room for those things to happen and maybe to even expect it and to give yourself grace. I don't believe in the word failure or like the definition of it. I honestly, like everything that I've done up until this point led me to here.
Yeah. And I think it's so important that you pointed it out because with all the experts and courses and all these things, it kind of puts the pressure on many people to figure it out now, to get it done now. It has to be quick. It has to be fast. But it's like part of grace is is time. Like let yourself have time. God, universe knows exactly where your spirit needs to develop. That's why you feel uncomfortable where you're at, or like in that job, you felt uncomfortable because you're being squeezed. So you would jump to the next level and then you'll jump to the next level and you'll keep doing it. And that's what a spiritual journey and progression is.
It is such a spiritual entrepreneurship is a spiritual journey.
Oh, for sure. No, for sure. Because like you said, you are just tested in so many different ways and you're having to figure things out and like change on a dime and do all these things. But it's like when we don't allow ourselves the time to, like you said, try what we think feels right in the moment, then you really take away your progression. Because whoever's listening, if you're in a situation where you're like, this is not where I want to be, just know that you're there for a reason and it is meant to inform you or prepare you for that next level. So I love that you said that.
Yeah, it's serving its purpose in that moment, whether we understand it fully or not. I fully believe, and I think that's made the journey a little bit easier on me, is just trusting. I'm like, this is what intuitively feels right. So I'm going to do this thing. It's when I start to contract and I'm listening to that more of like, okay, like, why am I feeling this way? Should I not do this thing? Or is this not the way to go after this thing? Or I've become so much more in tune with myself, but I also just feel like energy. And I say the universe and spirit and all of that. I have learned so much about myself throughout this journey. And I'm so grateful for that. But I love what you said about having like a nice balance, because I remember when I got into astrology, it's been about 4 years ago, like really like looking at my birth chart. And I never really understood because I'm a Virgo sun. And I was like, but why? Like it says I'm a perfectionist, which I am, but it also says like I'm the most organized person. And in certain aspects of my life, I am. In other aspects, I'm not. Didn't know about my ADHD then, by the way. And so this woman kept offering me a free birth chart reading because I had helped her. I was gathering women business owners before I was even aware that I was doing it. And so she was like, before We Are Women Own existed. And so she wanted to thank me and I kept pushing it away. And so finally, it was around my birthday, she offered it to me again. And I was like, I'm going to do it. And I wrote, she's like, anything you want to talk about during our call? And I was like, I'm not so sure I'm really a Virgo. And the first thing she says to me is she just laughed and she's like, you are such a Virgo. However, there's so many other aspects to look at. And that's when I learned about, my moon and my rising, and I'm Pisces rising. So it's really interesting is like Virgo sun, Pisces rising, and Sagittarius moon, they're like also opposite from each other. So I feel like you can almost look at it as almost conflict, which I definitely feel internally sometimes, but it also kind of makes you a little more well-rounded. So with the Virgo sun, like, yes, we like order and perfection and, all of those things. Whereas the Pisces is more of like the dreamer, the more ethereal, more flexible, more fluid. So it was interesting that you called that out because I technically have both and I heavily resonate with my Pisces rising.
That's so interesting. And it's almost like it's like masculine, feminine. You have like an inherent balance between the two. And it's probably just like a matter of you listening to the call of what you need in the moment, right? So like sometimes you just need to rest. I'm glad that resonates, but that's so cool.
You are so right. Yeah.
That's really cool. And actually this is perfect because I think in like a past conversation or at some point you mentioned wanting to consciously run your business. And so I'm curious, like, what does that mean to you? Like, what does that look like?
Well, for me, it could mean so many things. And I've also been applying this into my personal life too. I think it's the definition, like I'm fine tuning it as I go along, but I've always had an appreciation for brands that really care about people on the planet. And so I think about that a lot in terms of who we are serving and showcasing on our platforms. Other brands that are mindful and conscious. And I'm not saying we only want to work with people who are perfect at these things. I don't think there's any such thing. And that's something that I've been having to learn on my own journey towards being more sustainable and eco-friendly and really paying attention to like where I put my dollars and all of that. It's hard to be perfect at it. But so even if a business has a long-term mission of achieving something that does in turn better our planet, or our communities, that really speaks to me. And what's interesting is I've been feeling this way. And that was a big disconnect for me, by the way. When I had my online women's boutique, I knew deep down I wanted to have eco-friendly and sustainable brands. I just knew at the time it wasn't going to be the thing that would sell. And I knew that because of being in the industry for so long. I'm so happy that we're seeing this big shift in the last year and the last couple of years that people are paying more attention. But that was a big disconnect. And I'm starting to find that kind of happened to me when I was like curating the brands that wanted to participate in our events. Some of them didn't fully align with those things. And that's okay. However, it is a big value of mine and for We Are Women Owned. So without really saying it, it started to just happen organically. And what was really cool is we hosted a Latina owned virtual pop-up in celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month in 2020. And so many of the Latina business owners that applied were in like the eco-sustainable space, or they gave back in really big ways, whether it was like the artisans that they worked with or donating a percentage of their proceeds to underserved communities, like local communities and things like that. And we have calls to connect all the brands, as many of the people that can join as possible before we launch the virtual pop-up. Because again, for me, it's also about the connections you make. And we try to facilitate that even without in person. And so many of them were like, I can't believe there's so many people in this space, because I hadn't stumbled upon them, other like Latinas, other women of color who also like, this is very important to them and they're in a similar line of work. It was so cool to just see how that kind of organically happened. So now it's something we're putting a little more toward the forefront, but it's just, of course, running a business, you have to think about money. I sometimes wish that weren't the case. I wish there were another way to go about things, but it's so clear that these women are so passionate about what they do and they want to leave their mark and make this world a better place. And that is my Like my biggest desire is to be a possibility model for others. And that's why I love these opportunities to kind of just talk and like share about my experience and being an open book. If I can get here, like so can you, and there's still so much work to be done. And I can't even imagine what's in store for the future, but we all have our hardships. We can really take something from those difficult moments and kind of turn it around into something really amazing. Because had I not gone through all of those hardships, I'm probably too sensitive for my own good, but I'm a very empathetic person. And I think that's why, or when you feel like, I don't say this out loud, like I don't walk around, and on the marketing for the sisterhood or, anything we do, I'm like, I'm so empathetic. I'm going to understand you, like I never walk around like, I think in me sharing, and I do share, sometimes I get personal on our calls and it's like business focused, but I do get personal because I don't want people to feel alone. And that gives them permission to show up and share and not to mask as I had done for so many years. There's so much power in vulnerability and honesty and authenticity. And so those are the brands I want to work with. They exemplify that as the founders, but they're also trying to figure out, like, aside from, running my business and doing what I can to see it thrive and survive, like what can I do for others and the planet? So I think of it from that standpoint, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does. And it's so inspiring, like seeing you speak about it, because first of all, thank you for showing your vulnerability, because it does show that you can be human and you can have feelings or like certain ideas or thoughts and still run a successful business, and you can have flaws and you can still run a successful business. And I love that you mentioned a few times, this is a value of me, of our company. This is a value. And I believe that the reason you started attracting those types of people is because values are something that people can feel. Like if that's something that really is a foundation for you, that's why. It's because, I can feel it. I can feel your authentic energy. I can feel the genuineness of your message, and your message is clear. And it's obvious to me why people are just like so drawn to like serving the mission and helping. And it's like so powerful and inspiring. And I know I'm going to walk away from this conversation thinking, how can I make the good space that impactful and meaningful in people's lives? And so it's really just incredible and amazing.
You're so sweet. Thank you for saying that. I'm not just saying this to say this because you gave me such a compliment, but even with you saying like, I can do more. We can all do more, but you are doing so much. And I just know from the 3 conversations that we've had in like the last 2 weeks, maybe you're one of my people. And that's why we're here today. When you know.
I appreciate it. I'm like blushing because it's like, I feel the exact same way. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's like my person, like my people for sure. So thank you for saying that. I'm glad I'm not the only one feeling it, but yeah, I definitely feel that. Are there any cool books or good books that you're reading right now that you would recommend?
Oh my God. So I love books. Here's the thing. I'll start them and then I just don't finish them. So I am kind of like challenging or like experimenting with audiobooks this year. However, I do miss like being able to highlight things and all of that. But maybe I can just listen to an audiobook like 5 times and then have it like registered in my head. But I started reading, and this has been on my list forever. And I finally I got the audio and the Kindle version, The Untethered Soul.
Yes. One of my all-time favorite books. A good one.
So recommend that. I'm still like in the beginning middle, but it's been on my brain for so long. And I even forgot what it was about. And I was like, something is calling me to this book. I just need to get it. I actually put it on my Christmas list because we did a couple Secret Santas and no one got it for me. So I think I was supposed to get it for myself, but I just have so much internal chatter. And I'm so hard on myself and so much ego talk that it makes sense that I've been drawn to this book for so long. So I'm excited to make it through that. I can do it. I'm trying to think of what else. I have my phone right here so we can see. I want to make at least 1 or 2 more suggestions. If you're into marketing, which I love marketing, there's someone that I discovered on Clubhouse who I'm obsessed with and has kind of like reinvigorated my love for marketing, because I just feel like it just got so boring, right? Like everybody was saying the same things. You and I are probably the same. Like we want something more innovative and exciting. So I recommend following, her name is Audria, I think. Richmond, and she has a book called Uncloned Marketing: How to Challenge the Norms with Profitable Marketing Campaigns. And her brain is just amazing. So definitely find her on Clubhouse too, if you're on Clubhouse, because she gives away so much knowledge in her Clubhouse rooms. I have to stop myself from like going into them, or else I'd never get any work done. Something else that I'm reading on and off. It's funny you read that Sway article, because I was talking to my best friend about, I wrote this line about how I didn't want to fight for my seat at the table. So I sat at the table chosen for me, which was very literal and figurative, but very literal. Like, I just sat with a certain group of people because that's kind of like where I was pushed and where I was expected to be. And so there's this book. I can't see it because there's like a play button on it, but I believe it's Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? And so obviously it deals with race. It talks about, other minority groups as well, but that's something that I was like, why haven't I heard of this book? It sounds like I came up with this line. So there's like a little bit of everything. It's like personal development, business, and just how to be a more compassionate, understanding human being and a better ally. So I hope those are decent recommendations.
Oh my gosh, those are amazing recommendations. That was so perfect. Thank you for sharing that. So where can people find you?
Yes, so you can find We Are Women Owned at We Are Women Owned on Instagram, or wearewomenOwned.com on our website. And then if you want to follow me personally, I haven't been posting a ton. I'll get back into it. I did take a big step back to take care of myself, but it's Lisa Nicole Rosado on Instagram. And we have a lot of really exciting things coming up for We Are Women Owned. We're launching our first permanent directory of women-owned small businesses, and we're really excited about that. And then we have our membership community for emerging women entrepreneurs. So we're so excited to have you come and speak to and with the community in a couple of weeks, Francesca.
I'm so excited. So excited. Thank you for sharing that. And we'll make sure everything you mentioned is linked in the show notes. So it's really easy for everyone to follow and to find you and to join. So thank you so much, Lisa. Is there any last thing you want to share before we sign off?
Just go out there and get it is what I have to say. Go take a chance on yourself, and explore who you are, explore your interests. And I can promise you, once you do that, it's going to bring you so much closer to who you are, number one, but just having a more abundant life. And that's what I'm striving for. It's like, how can I feel the most abundant in my life? And that's not only in a monetary sense. Sure, that helps. But you and I were talking about our word for the year, and mine is wholeness. How can we just live more fulfilling, whole lives and kind of form into the most whole human beings that we can, if that makes sense? So go out there, explore, and find yourself.
I love it. Lisa, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now it's time for an affirmation. I listen to the promptings of my inner wisdom and take action with full trust and love. If you found today's tips inspiring or thought-provoking, share it right now on social media and make sure to tag me at Francesca A. Phillips or at Find Your Good Space, and also weigh in the comment section at findyourgoodspace.com. You can find links in the show notes. And if you have a spiritual or mindfulness problem that you want me to unpack on an upcoming The Good Space episode, or an awesome manifesting story you want to share, give my podcast phone line a ring right now at 917-719-0867. Also, don't forget to download my free morning routine guide. It's what helped me reduce my anxiety, increase productivity, and so much more. The link to everything I mentioned is in the show notes. See you soon.